how cool is it that you don't know what's coming? Like, you never know what's coming. You never know if you haven't even met the best person in your life yet. You never know if this giant magical opportunity is coming your way. Like, we want to plan everything, but I think the best things just come out of left field. And I think the surprise is really fun. And I think I really experienced that this year. Hello, friends, and welcome back. Every year, as I am closing up the year, one of the episodes I always like to do is my biggest lessons. So today I want to talk about some of the big lessons that I experienced this year, some realizations I had over 2025. Maybe some of the same energies were going on for you. Maybe they weren't. And if they were or weren't, I would love to hear in the comments. I always feel like it's so cool to hear the different themes that came up for different people, because we all are walking different journeys, but there is also a lot of crossover. And I know for me, I had a couple of friends who I felt like I was very much mirroring them. We were very much walking through a lot of the same lessons and themes and supporting each other through that. And then I had a lot of other friends where they were walking through a very different set of lessons, which is helpful because I can also learn from what they are uncovering themselves. So, I feel like a big theme of all of these this year, and I have 15 things written down, but most of them are like all connected to each other, so it's not really that many. I feel like it was a lot more realizations, kind of looking at it and seeing things clearly, more than it was like being in a heavy kind of lesson. And that's one of the things that actually, it's at the bottom, but I'll just say it now. One of the things I wrote down was being an observer versus being in it. And that was one of the techniques that my guides kept showing me was, and I think that there's a healthy time and space for both of these perspectives, but just kind of observing a lot more versus being in it. And it gave me a lot more clarity. And I felt like I was able to process things a lot more clearly. And that's a really common approach, when we think about rewiring our beliefs, for example, our healing traumas. One technique can be going back to the memory and seeing it as a third-party outsider, seeing it as an observer. So it's not like it's a new technique or anything, but there were a lot more things in my life, and even while I was in the experience, where instead of reacting, instead of even just immediately responding, I would kind of zoom out and just see the nuances of the situation to see the bigger picture. And that was really helpful for me. And I think I learned in a new way how important it is to not always be so caught up in it. And I think that also helps a lot with patience as a human, when we can get impatient, or when we can become so emotional that we want to just change something or do something. I'm definitely like that, where when I'm feeling a certain feeling, I just want to change the energy. And sometimes it's about just kind of observing what's happening and letting things move, and not always having to decide something or do something to change it. So that was like a really important thing for me. And I kind of used that throughout the whole year to witness what was happening as a lot of things change. And I think if I could high level say the themes for me this year, it was one of the first years in a long time. I mean, I really didn't travel that much this year, which is interesting for me. And that's such a big part of my, fills my soul. So that was interesting. But I had 2 moves, which I moved a lot in the last 5 years, but we moved into a new house. We moved into dreamland. I feel like professionally that was like a big thing, moving into dreamland and having a space this big. I haven't had an office that like this in many years, and I've never had an office this big. So it really opened up a lot, and having an event space, there was just a lot of different opportunity, and it took me in a very different direction than I thought I was going to go this year. Dreamland was one of the big initiatives. And the other thing was the app, which has been amazing. So having the Christina the Channel app so that you guys can listen to all of the guided energy work and meditations right on your phones. It's just totally changed the user experience. And that was a big energy shift. So those were kind of the 2 projects we worked on this year. And I felt like outside of that, I was moving through a lot of personal things. Like I said, one of the big lessons I really learned this year was how much I need to just trust that things are going to come out of left field and I'll know when I need to know, and I think Dreamland was a perfect example of that. I've talked about this a couple of times now, but I never thought I was going to open this space, and opening this space led us to having a lot more in-person events, and I saw a lot more clients than I usually do. I was just doing a lot of things because I had the space to do it, and I'm glad I did those things, but it was just very different than what I had planned for this year, and that was all for a reason, but this one really hit me out of left field, and I think because I'm psychic with so many things, like, I mean, the reality is my biggest blind spot is my own life. Like, it's much easier to read anybody else than it is yourself, and I actually don't spend as much time reading myself as I probably should. I think a lot of intuitives are like that. I spend a lot more time kind of everywhere else. But I really didn't see this one coming. But also, I'm walking the earth walk, doing the human thing just as much as anybody else, if not even more so. And it's really just, I think there's a level of remembering the magic that happens in life. Like, how cool is it that you don't know what's coming? Like, you never know what's coming. You never know if you haven't even met the best person in your life yet. You never know if this giant magical opportunity is coming your way. Like, we want to plan everything, but I think the best things just come out of left field. And I think the surprise is really fun. And I think I really experienced that this year. But I would say a big theme for me was about relationships and communication in relationships. And for me, how I navigate my gifts in the way that I see the world, with my clairvoyance and my energetic awareness and sensitivity, and how that comes into play in personal relationships and dynamics. Like, that was a real thing I was exploring this year. And I released a lot of relationships this year. I set really clear boundaries with a lot of people. I realized how many things I was letting happen, and how many things I was just saying it's fine because I love that person. I know their heart, and it really wasn't fine. And this was the year I really realized that it wasn't fine, and I'll go into that more, but this is related to what I wrote down. I'm just going to read a few of these here and tie it all together because this is kind of most of my list. And I'm going to take a note there. But one was, I wrote a note about self-betrayal, like noticing where the real trust that had been broken was me with myself, because I had told myself that I had, like, I made promises to myself about taking care of myself, and I was betraying myself when I was letting things slide, or when I was choosing somebody else's wants or needs over my own, or where I was going along with the flow for the sake of, I don't want to be, irritating anybody, or what's the point really, instead of just like really trusting myself. And that came through in a lot of different ways. I think one of those was where I didn't trust really subtle red flags. And I'm sure this is not the first yearly lessons I learned where I said that, but that has been like a real lesson for me. Because I'll see it clearly, but it's not always easy, like being the one person that sees a red flag and everybody else around you is like, oh no, it's great, blah, blah. And so you're just like, whatever. And then it turns out to be a problem. And I'm like, I really should have not allowed that in, or I really should have said something. But I think I've just really learned that if you give people an inch, they'll take a mile. And if I get a really subtle ping, like, to really trust it, there are so many times this year that people, like, things blew up, and then, people came back around and they're like, I really should have listened to you. And I'm like, I should have been a little more forthcoming. I should have been a bit more direct, or a little bit stronger in how I'm saying what I'm picking up. And I think a lot of what I realized is how much I water down what I'm getting, like, honestly. And that's something that I've been unraveling a lot towards the end of this year, and like just how much I water it down. And it's not like an active intentional thing, but it was a really deep subconscious thing that had to do with a lot of wounds from when I was younger, and trying to protect people, but really underneath that was just trying to protect myself. And so it's really about trusting myself and being willing to call it like I see it and not worry about being too direct or too bold, which I know might be shocking for people, but it is what it is. And with that, there was, where do I leak energy because I let things slide? That was another thing I wrote down. Like, I'm letting things slide. I'm letting people in through the side door when I said I wouldn't, because they're my friend, because I love them, because I know their heart, when it's like, at the end of the day, behavior is behavior. And it doesn't matter if, you're my BFF forever. Like, if that's not cool or not clean energetically, I'm going to say something. And I really had to say a lot and call out really subtle things, because it's one thing when people do things that are just so outwardly like not okay. It's another when it's kind of like a subtle thing. It's like a subtle, I'm going to assert my superiority over you, or a subtle, like, there's a lot of like trying to spiritually dominate people that goes on. And this industry is like whack, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of, so I had heard somebody call it like the Enlightenment Olympics. I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of like proving yourself, and it gets tricky. That's why it's so important to be grounded. And I really trust and know like how grounded I am. I think it's one of my superpowers amidst all the chaos, and really just calling things out and calling a spade and not making excuses for other people. Was a big one for me, because that was an energy leak. Honestly, really big energy leak. With that, and again, these are all connected. Where did I create my own resentment? I was healing a lot of resentment energy I had this year. Like, that was a huge theme for me. And I realized these places were deep inside me. I had a resentment, and I had to get to the bottom of that. And the bottom of that was always that I created that for myself, because I said yes when I wanted to say no. And so then I started to resent the situation, and your ego wants to like blame other people. Like, no one's taking your time away from you, for example, right? You are giving your time to people. And so it's taking responsibility for our choices and our perspective. And I had to really get to the bottom of where I had created that resentment because I wasn't saying no to things, or because I wasn't being clear about what I wanted and what I didn't. So there was a lot with my relationship with myself. Moving with that was this general theme of making my circle a lot smaller, but more intentional. And I think that's a larger theme. I mean, that's certainly something that I think is coming up in a lot of places, and a really important lesson that we go through right now. And it comes up for a lot of people, but what I will say is I think you don't always realize or expect the people that are going to fall away. And I think, now my circle is smaller than ever before, but there's not anybody in my small circle that for me isn't like 100% resonant. And that has made me feel like so much safer. And I didn't even realize how much that would positively shift me, honestly. So it's kind of taking out all of the neutrals and all of the extras. I think a lot of people really want to just be surrounded by more energy. And I've never really been like that. I've never been someone that like really wants a huge group of friends. Never been like that. I've always been somebody that has like different friend groups, or I have a lot of individual friends. But a lot of those individual friends kind of like fell away, and new people came in. But I think my resonance was shifting a lot. Well, I know it was. And I also know that I was kind of being pulled somewhere else. And I found that when things are feeling good and then you start feeling unsatisfied, it's because you're being pulled somewhere else. And I really realized that. Like, I feel like I'm ending the year being really clear on what I want moving into next year. And it was only because the things that were working before just really stopped working for me this year. And in terms of like what was bringing me joy and where I felt at home and all of that. And it just stopped working. And at first it makes you really frustrated because you feel like it's a you problem. And then I realized I'm just being pulled somewhere else. And once I opened myself up to that, I realized like, wow, I'm being guided to something else that's going to make me happy. And I think it's important to understand that it's not a destination we're going to hit. It's like this moving target, and we get to enjoy the process. So changing the circle a lot, that the right circle will really make you feel loved, and I think that, again, especially in the spiritual space, for whatever reason, there's just a lot of judgment. Unfortunately, there's a lot of like competition. It's not really actually that loving of a space, which is why most of my friends are not in this industry. I mean, I certainly have friends in this industry, but a lot of them are not, or they have a different kind of niche. But it's really simple. It's like you pay attention to the way you feel with people. And if you feel like just unconditionally loved and supported and seen, that's correct. And if you don't, it's not. And that just became really, really clear to me when I started to pay attention to how my body felt. There was a huge thing for me with opening, like my body kind of opening or shutting down. And I noticed this big time with my gifts. Like what I know to be true, and it's always been this way, is when I'm with someone who is really able to receive and they are vibrating at a certain place, and typically that's non-judgment and non-attachment and openness and love and curiosity, like my channel starts to flow and I am responding to that openness and energy, and it's a safe container. And if it's not a safe container, I will just kind of turn off that connection, or I won't have much to say. And so I pay attention to the natural flow of things. I say this because I feel like it's really common for people to make themselves wrong. And I do think sometimes there can be growth opportunities with vulnerability, for example, with opening up, with communication. But I noticed a lot over the last few years, like I had been trying to work on things that people told me I needed to work on. And this year I just had different perspective and realized that I didn't actually have a problem with those things, that I was actually more dealing with projections, and for whatever reason, was trusting other people's perspectives instead of just my own intuition. And it wasn't that I had a problem with those things. It was that when I wasn't in a container where I felt safe, I wasn't opening up, and that's okay. Because there's a real thing that's our natural resonance system, and we open and we flow in the right environments, and we don't in unsafe or unhealthy environments. And I was really kind of untangling projections that people were throwing my way. And this really overlaps with this other topic that felt really ripe for me this year, which is this balance between humility and owning your power. And a lot of that was connected to dealing with projections. And this kind of like, is there a problem with vulnerability or trust, or is it just discernment? And I had a lot of people telling me like I had a problem with vulnerability, when really I realized it was just my own internal discernment being like, no, because in other places there's no problem there. There's no problem with that flow. And if I was honest about the red flags I saw or felt, I realized, why I wasn't leaning in those places. But this balance between humility and owning your power is something that I've always kind of been looking at and exploring. Humility is a core value for me, and I really think that's so much of why I get to have the gifts I do and have the spiritual experiences I do. But I think sometimes, more often than not, I kind of sway too far on that. Like, oh, there's more to learn. What's my blind spot? Blah, blah, blah. And I feel like this year really gave me a lot of confirmation and validation and reflection. And thankfully some like beautiful people in my life like helped me with this, and mentors and things like that. But like, the other side of that, owning your power, right? And there's a way to own your power with humility. And that is real power rooted in love. It's like being able to be humble, but also when you're clear in something and when you have any type of power within you, when you have a clarity, just owning that. And it doesn't mean you're saying that as if you know everything. It doesn't mean you're saying that and it could, never change, but it's just owning where you're at right there and like being confident in that. And I think that this is one of the energies that is, it's one of the rarest energies to find. And when I meet people who really embody that, right? Like they are very humble and they also really strongly and clearly own their power. Like that's a superpower. And those are people that I really love to be around and learn from and trust. But I think most people probably swing too far in one side of the pendulum, and it's learning, again, this kind of new relationship with our power and how much claiming and owning it can actually help people. And for me, I realized how watering myself down was just me being selfish and wanting to protect myself instead of helping people and sharing things with people, because I was more worried about, not wanting to upset anybody or hurt their feelings, really, because I didn't want to deal with that. Which is a kind of a whole other thing. Like it's not mine to deal with, but my sensitivity didn't want to experience that. So then I'm holding back when really it's all just a selfish thing, about myself. And actually it's more important to share our gifts. It's more important to be clear and to kind of trust whatever unravels from that, I had some really tough things happen this year with female friendships. And I know I've talked about this on the show before. Like this has been definitely a thing for me in my life. And I hadn't had this pattern occur in many years, really. And there are a couple of people who all had the same exact energy. Like, and I would even, like, I noted that. I was like, it's so weird. I have these few friends and they all have like the same exact energy. And it was tough, honestly. Like I felt like my heart was broken. I felt betrayed, but that was all like a really big learning lesson of where I let things slide, where I didn't trust the subtle red flags, where, an unhealed inner child wound was, oh, if I love this person enough, if I'm just really loving and kind, I can bring out the best in them, which is such like a healer thing, but I think really just allowing myself to trust what I see and what I know and not hope that people rise into their potential if I can just love them more and hold that potential for them. Like I can't do that for anybody else. And I really believe people can change, but I also know that a lot of people don't, and you have to really choose that. And I can't expect anything from anybody else, right? That's the attachment right there. So that was a really, really big learning lesson for me this year. And I've never been more discerning about who's in my inner circle. And that's something a lot of my friends and I have been discussing, of just like the power of that inner circle, right? So I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Well, I'll kind of flows into the next section. I think I had a lot of realizations about the realm of intuitive gifts and kind of my relationship with my gifts, and also this industry. I feel like a lot of this year I had really interesting experiences revealed to me where I was just getting a big reality check about how many unhealed healers there are. And I'm not saying anybody needs to be like perfect. We're all learning things. We all have things, but like a lot of very ego-driven people running around, and people who are working in these arts and guiding people in these arts, and they don't really understand what they're doing. And I feel really, really strongly about it. And there's that piece of me that feels guilty calling that out, but I'm just like beside myself. The number of things I saw this year that were just unacceptable. And it's never made me believe more in why it's so important to have training and mentorship from people that are, have been doing it longer than you or can see things that you can't see. And like, you really have to trust your resonance with that, because there's a lot of people, coaching in every industry or mentoring, that have no business doing it either. So there's that. And, that's a whole other topic of how you find the right person. I think there's a big resonance piece to that. And I think it's very much when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Like, every mentor in my life, I haven't had to like try to search for it. Very much divinely drops in, and it's been super aligned. So, and I've also had shitty mentors too. And I've had to, say and do some tough things where I'm like calling that out, like, because it's not about anybody being perfect, but there's just a lot to say in that. But I just think it's more important than ever before that we stay in integrity, and that we really bring back the art in every industry. And I see this big picture and kind of culturally, I feel like everybody is like calling themselves a this or that, and they're not really this or that. Like, people are saying they're a social media manager and they don't know anything about social media strategy. People are saying that they're a marketing expert and they don't know anything about marketing. Like, people are saying they're a videographer or a graphic designer and they know how to use Canva, and it's one thing if you're like, hey, I can help you with your Canva graphics. No problem with that. But it's a lot of like disrespecting the art of things. And I feel that really strongly in my industry, in my space, for sure. The number of people that like call themselves a channel or an oracle, and they don't actually do that art. They don't actually work with energy in that way, and it bothers me, because a lot of people are really running out of integrity, and surprise, surprise, that's why they struggle with money. That's why they struggle with relationships. That's why they deflect everybody. Like, it's not a mystery for me, because it shows up on your field like a red flag, right? But I think that people need to get really like real about what they're actually doing and what their scope actually is, and own that and claim that and go deeper into that. But I just think this integrity piece about like, what are you actually doing, and can you just claim that instead of pretending like you're something you're not, is really important to me. The number of people that like put speaker in their bio and they've never given a speech, like that kind of thing. We've got to look at it, because I don't know. I think about art, for example, and how much it's changed. And I love that people are being creative, but there's a difference between, me singing in my shower and Ariana Grande singing. It's just like, it's like, I'm not a singer. I'm singing in my shower. So I do think that this relationship with identity and what we put out there, we just got to really look at very, very clearly. And I think that I'm really here for the positive self-talk and the encouragement and the going for things and the believing in ourselves. And I'm also really here for radical personal responsibility. And I really believe the most important thing for me in life, and what I believe is so important for any type of success, is a willingness to always look at your own BS. Like, if you are just always interested in and willing to look at your BS, and you have this attitude of like, whoa, I'm so happy to find that blind spot because now I can work on it, and you love to learn in that way and grow in that way, you're unstoppable. But I think people have kind of lost that attitude. It was rare to begin with, but it's just so important, So I think I've never been more fired up about training more healers, and I'm so proud of the Ahai practitioners that go through our training. And like, I'm strict, kind of, I'm really clear. I have a really in-depth training process, I feel like, that people don't get. And it's important because it's about honoring the art and the craft. And this is why things like continued education matter. I think it's really interesting when people say they want to do XYZ and they just want to take one course on it and never study it again. It's like, if you really want to master a skill or be somebody that is expert in something, if you want to really serve or be that best version of yourself, or claim that you are an expert, you've got to really keep going. Like, my curiosity never ends. And so I think I reached a new level of like appreciation for myself through all of that witnessing. And it also really fired me up about kind of the mission and where I want to head. With that, I think unfolding and seeing how much like kind of bad advice is out there, to be honest. And look, most advice, I could say all, I don't know. I don't really like to speak in absolutes, but most advice, it's like, it's great sometimes, not applicable in others. Like that's the reality, right? But one of the things about my gifts that I really came home to was I know that things are meant to be simple. It doesn't mean I'm never going to be challenged, but I think really feeling into the difference between when something is challenging because there's a growth opportunity, like it's hitting an edge, or when it's hard because it's just not where you're supposed to go. And I had to really realize that I cannot be everything to everybody, and I don't have to be everything to everybody. And there's a lot of liberation in that. I don't have to have the answer to everything that people ask. And if people expect something of me, I don't have to meet that expectation. And I think really realizing that, I started to unravel how I want to use my gifts and what makes me happiest in the way I use my gifts, instead of trying to meet what other people wanted or how they wanted me to go about that. Because I felt like there was a lot of projections and a lot of kind of trying to put me in a box because people didn't understand things. And I think for me, just coming back to like what feels the most natural for me and is the most fun for me, and let me just lean all the way into that. And just because I can do XYZ doesn't mean I should. So that was a really big thing for me. I think it's a really important lesson for people in general. And I'll tell you, like, I talk to clients about this all the time. I'm like, why are you spending so much time trying to do it this way when this other skill you have or this other way of doing it is so easy for you? And I think we all tend to overcomplicate things. Like, I for sure do that. And I have to really constantly check myself. I mean, it's like an ongoing thing. How can this be simpler? Because it's supposed to be simple. And I think just giving myself permission to let things be easier has been a huge liberation point for me this year. And with that, you know, when I think about how do I want to use my gifts, when am I happiest, and where do I want to go if, you know, nothing else matters? Like, just what do I want to be spending my time doing? I got a lot of clarity. And I also realized where I wasn't giving myself permission to take care of myself as well as I could have. So one of the things that I learned this year more than ever has been about taking care of my body for my career. You know, so the same way that an athlete's going to take care of their body, a professional athlete will take care of their body in a particular way so that they can show up and do a good job in the athletic event. I also like really need to take care of myself. The more frequency work I'm doing, the more energy work I'm doing, and a lot of things just really exploded for me this year, and it was a really big recalibration period. And I'll give you a really practical example. Like, I had this huge realization. Well, first it was like I have to have a weekly massage. So I had my weekly massages, but I still didn't feel like it was enough. And I told my partner, I was like, I feel my best when I get 2 massages a week, but I feel like I shouldn't get 2 massages a week. And he was like, why? Like, if you get 2 massages a week, that's just what you need to do to take care of your body so that you can channel as much as you do and like give as many sessions as you do. How is that any different than an athlete who needs to, you know, go to specific types of recovery every day for their career? And I was like, you're so right. And I think this goes back to, again, the problem was me not giving myself permission. But there are things like I know my body needs, like the amount of rest I need, the amount of recovery I need, the amount of like lymphatic work I need, and just being really clear with myself, like, I need 2 massages a week. I need weekly lymphatic work. I have to spend this much time a day opening my channels and working my system. And when I do that, I feel amazing. And when I don't feel as good. But it's like just the difference between me being able to do what I do with ease and joy versus like me feeling tired all the time. And so I think it was really like giving myself permission to be stricter and a little bit higher maintenance to be able to kind of maintain all of the energy work I'm doing, you know, because it is a lot of movement, and just I had a lot more, I like travel, but I've been going to LA a lot this year. I've been back and forth a lot more than I ever have. So I'm in the car driving a lot. And I, you know, because we're here, I'm doing a lot more like events and a lot more sessions. And sometimes they're really long days, right? But it's really hard on the body, and I think a lot of people don't realize like how much like real energy work, not like real energy work, really like working in the quantum and moving that, how that affects the body, but also like channeling in itself is there's a lot of energy flowing, right? So you have to like really take care of your body for that to be easeful and feel aligned. So I would say like my biggest thing there was giving myself permission. And the last thing that I really learned this year, which I actually think is going to come up in one of the energy updates, was about energetic preparation. Like I learned this year more than ever, because I'm just very much I don't want to plan in advance. I want to show up and I just channel it. And I feel like that is when I do my best work. I do much better in the moment, feeling the energy and just letting it flow, than if I try to plan in advance. It just isn't that great, honestly. But what I have really learned is taking more time to energetically prepare, like to energetically to drop in, to sit with things, to let my body acclimate, to let the energy unfold. For me, like really reading the field and kind of setting up the architecture of the space so that things can unfold, and like setting it all up and just spending more time to like energetically prep and drop in. I don't need to practically do anything, but I think I have really learned how important it is. And, you know, I always do this for big things, but it's been with the little things in my day as well. Just taking extra time to like slowly but surely ease my way into the situation, and taking that extra moment to breathe and to sit, and a lot more moments of just presence. And I think that intentionality and pulling my energy into the present moment so I can be fully there. So that has come with, you know, slowing down a little bit. But that has been huge for me. I had a big resurgence of like creative energy, I feel like this year, with things like home decor and changing my wardrobe and playing with makeup more. And I actually realized a lot this year how many things I had stopped doing that bring me joy because of things that people had said to me when I was younger that I just like honestly didn't even realize. And I was I've told a couple of people this recently. I'm like, I realized when like an idea came forward and I would go, oh my God, I used to love doing that. And I thought, why did I stop? And I thought, oh my God, it was because somebody said something to me when I was a kid, that I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that. And I think I did a lot. I used to do a lot to like make myself smaller or to make myself blend in more because I always felt so different. And then you become older and you realize that's the best part. And so I feel like I'm really coming back to a lot of what makes me feel like me again, and a lot of like creativity and it's like decorating and creating a vibe. And, you know, I'm big on spaces, I've always been, but hitting that to a new level and like really like realizing that I told myself I wasn't good at things that it doesn't matter if I'm good at, I enjoy it. So doing it anyway, like decorating my house. I like hadn't decorated my house because I'm like, I'm not good at decorating a house. I need to hire a designer, and I just never did. And then I was like, I can do this. It's my house. And I did a great job and I love it. I literally love it. It feels so much like me. So little things like that. I had a lot of really good healing moments, just like realizations of things I haven't thought about in a long time that I feel like just came forward for me to remember and then to heal that part of my inner child. So that was really, really fun. And I feel like there were a lot of places I just wasn't feeling like clicked in, or I wasn't feeling like myself. And I feel really grateful that I'm ending this year feeling like really like myself in a way that I haven't in a long time. So I'm really excited about that. But a lot of big lessons this year. So those were some of my big themes and lessons for 2025. I would love to hear if you had any anything similar or anything different. Let me know what you feel like your big personal lessons were, realizations, however you want to phrase it. And then we can all learn from each other. And there will be more to come next year, as always. But I'm very excited. So that will complete my 2025 biggest lessons I learned wrap up before we head into our final few episodes of the year. Well, I guess maybe there's one more, which is wild. And then we will be in 2026. So thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I will chat with you again next episode.